The desert sun beat down mercilessly on Camp Pendleton's rifle range as Staff Sergeant Elena Rodriguez adjusted her position behind the Barrett M82A1. Sweat trickled down her temples, but her hands remained steady. She had been preparing for this moment for months, the international precision rifle competition that would determine which Marine would represent the United States at the World Military Games. Elena's journey to this point hadn't been easy. Growing up in a small Texas border town, she had learned to shoot from her grandfather, a Vietnam veteran who taught her that precision wasn't just about hitting targets, it was about discipline, patience, and respect for the weapon. When she enlisted in the Marines 8 years ago, she had one goal: to become the best marksman in the Corps. But being a woman in a field dominated by men came with challenges she hadn't anticipated. The whispers in the mess hall, the questioning looks when she outshot her male counterparts, the subtle ways some of her fellow Marines tried to undermine her confidence. Elena had pushed through it all, earning her place through sheer skill and determination. Now, as she prepared for the qualifying round that would select the team for the competition, she could feel eyes on her. Gunnery Sergeant Mike Torres, a 20-year veteran with a reputation for old-school thinking, stood nearby with a group of Marines. His arms were crossed, and his expression made it clear he didn't think she belonged here. "Think she can handle the pressure?" one of them muttered, just loud enough for Elena to hear. "We'll see," Torres replied, his voice carrying across the range. Competition shooting is different from range practice. Takes more than just good scores. Elena forced herself to focus on her breathing. She had learned long ago that responding to such comments only gave them more power. Instead, she channeled her frustration into her shooting, using it to sharpen her concentration. The qualifying round consisted of multiple shooting positions at various distances, from 300 meters to 1,200 meters. Elena moved through each station methodically, her shots finding their marks with consistent precision. Her rifle, a customized M40A6 that she had personally modified and tuned, felt like an extension of her body. Every adjustment, every scope calibration, every trigger pull was second nature to her. As the day progressed, it became clear that Elena was outperforming most of the other candidates. Her groupings were tighter, her scores higher, and her consistency unmatched. But, with each impressive shot, she noticed the tension among some of her fellow Marines growing. During a break, she overheard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "She's making us all look bad," Corporal Jenkins said, kicking at the dirt. "Command's going to think we've gone soft if a woman is our best shooter." "Maybe her equipment is giving her an unfair advantage," suggested another Marine. "Those modifications of hers, who knows what kind of edge they're giving her." Torres remained silent, but Elena could see him considering the words. She knew that look, it was the same expression her drill instructors had worn when they were planning something that would test her beyond normal limits. Elena tried to dismiss her concerns as paranoia, but a nagging feeling in her gut told her otherwise. She had worked too hard to get to this point to let suspicion and doubt cloud her judgment now. She needed to stay focused on the competition ahead. The next morning brought the announcement everyone had been waiting for. Elena had not only qualified for the team but had earned the top spot, making her the lead shooter for the United States. The news should have been the pinnacle of her career, but the reactions around her were mixed. While some Marines congratulated her genuinely, others offered only grudging acknowledgement or outright silence. Colonel Sarah Mitchell, the base commanding officer and one of the few senior female officers Elena looked up to, pulled her aside after the announcement. "Congratulations, Rodriguez," Colonel Mitchell said, but her expression was serious. "You've earned this position fair and square, but I want you to be prepared for what's coming. Not everyone is going to be happy about your selection, and some people might try to test you in ways that go beyond normal competition pressure." Elena nodded, understanding the unspoken warning. "I can handle it, ma'am. I've been handling it my entire career." "I know you can," Colonel Mitchell replied. "But I also know that what you're about to face might be different from anything you've experienced before. Trust your instincts, and don't let anyone convince you that you don't belong there." Over the next several weeks, Elena threw herself into preparation for the World Military Games. The competition would feature the best military marksmen from around the globe, and the longest shot in the competition would be an unprecedented 4,500 meters, nearly 3 miles. It was a distance that pushed the absolute limits of rifle technology and human skill. Elena spent countless hours on the range, working with her rifle and studying wind patterns, atmospheric conditions, and ballistics calculations. The mathematics involved in such a long-distance shot were staggering. She had to account for bullet drop, wind drift, humidity, temperature, altitude, the Coriolis effect caused by the Earth's rotation, and dozens of other variables that could affect the projectile's flight path. Her rifle setup was crucial for this kind of precision. The M40A6 she had been assigned was good, but, for the extreme distances required in the competition, she needed something more specialized. After weeks of research and testing, she settled on a custom-built rifle based on the Chetak M200 platform, chambered in .408 Chetak caliber. The rifle was a marvel of engineering, capable of maintaining supersonic velocity and accuracy at distances that would reduce other calibers to ineffective lobbing. Every component had been carefully selected and precisely fitted. The barrel was a match-grade piece of art, hand-lapped to perfection. The scope was a Schmidt & Bender 5-45x56 with custom turrets calibrated specifically for her load and environmental conditions. The stock was adjustable for perfect fit, and the trigger was set to break at exactly 2 pounds with no creep or over-travel. But the rifle was only part of the equation. Elena knew that success at extreme distances required an almost meditative level of mental preparation. She worked with sports psychologists to develop visualization techniques, practiced breathing exercises that would keep her calm under pressure, and studied the competition venues to understand the environmental challenges she would face. The ammunition was another critical component. Elena worked with ballisticians to develop a custom load using 419-grain solid copper bullets with a ballistic coefficient that would maintain stability and accuracy across the extreme distance. Each round was hand-loaded and individually weighed to ensure consistency. The powder charge was measured to within 1/10 of a grain, and each case was inspected for defects that could affect accuracy. As the departure date for the competition approached, Elena felt ready. She had pushed herself and her equipment to their limits, and she was confident in her abilities. But, late one evening, while she was cleaning her rifle in the armory, she noticed Gunnery Sergeant Torres and 2 other Marines having a heated discussion in the corner. "This is bigger than just our unit," Torres was saying. "If she wins this thing, it's going to change everything. Command is going to think women can do any job in the military." "So what are you suggesting?" Jenkins asked. Torres looked around to make sure they weren't being overheard, not realizing that Elena was hidden behind a row of gun safes. "I'm saying that sometimes equipment failures happen at the worst possible times. Especially when that equipment has been modified beyond standard specifications." Elena's heart pounded as she realized what she was hearing. They were planning to sabotage her rifle. The weapon that she had spent months perfecting, the tool that represented years of dedication and sacrifice, was going to be tampered with. She remained hidden until the 3 Marines left the armory, then immediately went to examine her rifle. Everything appeared normal, but she knew that skilled sabotage wouldn't be immediately obvious. She spent the next hour going over every component, every screw, every adjustment, but found nothing out of place. The uncertainty was almost worse than discovering actual tampering. Had she misunderstood their conversation? Was her paranoia getting the better of her? Or were they planning something for later, when she wouldn't have time to inspect her equipment thoroughly? Elena faced a difficult decision. She could report what she had overheard, but, without proof, it would be her word against theirs. Making such an accusation could backfire and damage her career, especially if she was wrong about their intentions. But, if she remained silent and they did sabotage her rifle, she could fail in the competition and waste the opportunity she had worked her entire career to achieve. She decided to handle the situation herself. Over the next few days leading up to their departure, Elena took extraordinary precautions with her rifle. She never left it unattended, even going so far as to sleep in the armory on their last night at Camp Pendleton. She memorized every setting, every measurement, every tiny detail of her weapon's configuration. The morning of their departure, Elena conducted one final inspection of her rifle. As she worked through her checklist, her heart sank. The scope's elevation turret was off by 2 clicks, a seemingly minor adjustment that would cause her shots to hit several feet low at extreme distances. The rifle's trigger had been adjusted to a heavier pull weight, affecting the precise timing she had practiced for months. Most insidiously, someone had slightly loosened the action screws that secured the barrel to the stock, which would cause the rifle's accuracy to degrade with each shot. The sabotage was subtle and expertly done. To a casual observer, everything would appear normal. Even during initial testing, the rifle might seem to function properly. But, under the stress and precision demands of competition, these small changes would cause increasingly poor performance, making it look like Elena had simply cracked under pressure. Elena felt a mixture of rage and betrayal wash over her. These were supposed to be her fellow Marines, people who had sworn the same oath to protect and defend. Instead, they had chosen to sabotage her chances rather than accept that she might be better than them. But Elena had not come this far to be defeated by petty jealousy and closed-minded thinking. She had faced adversity before, and she had always found a way to overcome it. This situation would be no different. Working quickly and methodically, Elena began to repair the damage. She readjusted the scope to her precise settings, returned the trigger to its proper pull weight, and retightened the action screws to their exact specifications. But she knew that simply fixing the immediate problems wasn't enough. If Torres and his conspirators were willing to sabotage her once, they might try again. Elena made a decision that would require courage beyond anything she had shown on any battlefield. She would not only compete in the World Military Games, but she would win. She would prove that her selection was based on merit, not politics or social engineering. And she would do it in a way that would leave no doubt about her capabilities. The competition was about to become more than just a test of marksmanship skills. It was going to be a proving ground for Elena's determination, resilience, and refusal to be defeated by those who would rather tear her down than acknowledge her excellence. As she packed her gear for the journey to the competition site in Switzerland, Elena made a silent promise to herself, to her grandfather who had taught her to shoot, and to every young woman who might one day face similar challenges. She would not just participate in this competition, she would dominate it. The flight to Switzerland gave Elena time to reflect on the journey that had brought her to this point. She thought about the little girl from Texas who had first picked up a rifle, the young Marine who had endured countless challenges to prove herself, and the woman she had become through years of dedication and perseverance. But she also thought about the sabotage attempt and what it represented. It wasn't just about one competition or one rifle. It was about the broader struggle for acceptance and equality in a profession that had traditionally excluded women from many roles. Elena realized that her performance in this competition would send a message far beyond the shooting sports community. She was no longer just competing for herself or even for her unit. She was competing for every woman who had been told she wasn't strong enough, fast enough, or tough enough. She was competing for every Marine who had ever been doubted because they didn't fit the traditional mold. The weight of that responsibility was both daunting and motivating. Elena knew that failure would be seen as proof that the doubters were right, while success might open doors for future generations of female Marines. As the plane began its descent into Zurich, Elena looked out the window at the Swiss Alps rising majestically in the distance. Somewhere among those peaks was the shooting range where she would face the ultimate test of her skills and determination. She closed her eyes and visualized the shot she would need to make 4,524 meters across a valley, with wind conditions and atmospheric pressures she could only estimate. In her mind, she saw the bullet leaving her rifle, arcing through the thin mountain air, and finding its target with perfect precision. When she opened her eyes, Elena Rodriguez was ready to prove that excellence has no gender, and that the Marine Corps had chosen its representative well. The Alpine Shooting Center nestled in the Swiss mountains like a fortress of precision, its modern facilities carved into the landscape with typical Swiss engineering excellence. As Elena stepped off the bus with the American team, the crisp mountain air filled her lungs, carrying with it the scent of pine and the promise of challenge. The facility was impressive beyond anything she had experienced. Multiple ranges stretched across the valley floor, with targets positioned at distances that seemed to disappear into the mountain mist. The longest range extended nearly 5 kilometers, where targets appeared as mere specks against the rocky backdrop of the alpine peaks. Elena's teammates spread out to explore the facility, but she remained focused on studying the environment. Wind patterns in mountain valleys were notoriously complex, with thermal currents, downdrafts, and eddies that could change rapidly throughout the day. She pulled out a small weather station device and began taking readings, noting temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and wind speed and direction. "Impressive setup," came a voice behind her. Elena turned to see Captain Marcus Webb, the team leader and a decorated sniper with 3 combat tours. Webb had been supportive of Elena's selection, though she could sense he was still uncertain about having a woman on the team for such a high-profile competition. "Yes, sir," Elena replied, continuing her environmental assessment. "The altitude is going to affect bullet trajectory significantly. We're at nearly 2,000 meters elevation here, which means thinner air and less drag on the projectile. I'll need to adjust my ballistic calculations accordingly." Webb nodded, impressed by her methodical approach. "How are you feeling about the competition? The international field is strong this year. The British have their Commonwealth Games champion, the Germans are bringing their Olympic team captain, and the Russians." He paused. "Well, they're always formidable." Elena had studied the other competitors extensively during her preparation. Each represented the absolute pinnacle of their nation's shooting sports programs. Many had international competition experience that dwarfed her own. But she also knew that military marksmanship was different from civilian competition shooting. The ability to perform under extreme pressure, to adapt to changing conditions, and to maintain focus during extended periods of stress were skills that combat-trained Marines possessed in abundance. "I'm ready, sir," Elena said simply. "I know the competition will be intense, but I've prepared for this moment my entire career." As they walked toward the accommodations, Elena noticed Gunnery Sergeant Torres and his associates unpacking equipment nearby. Torres caught her eye and offered a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. The first 2 days at the facility were dedicated to practice and equipment verification. Each competitor was required to demonstrate their rifle's accuracy and to register their ammunition for ballistic testing. Elena worked methodically through the verification process, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Torres was watching her every move. During practice sessions, Elena's performance was exceptional. Her shots at 1,000 and 2,000 meters were consistently accurate, and her time from target acquisition to shot execution was among the fastest recorded. Other competitors began to take notice of the American woman who seemed to handle the demanding mountain conditions with ease. But Elena remained focused on the one shot that mattered most, the 4,500-meter attempt that would serve as the competition's ultimate test. Only competitors who performed well in the preliminary rounds would have the opportunity to attempt the extreme distance shot, and Elena was determined to be among them. On the evening before the competition began, Elena was cleaning her rifle in the equipment room when she discovered something that made her blood run cold. Hidden in her rifle case, tucked behind a foam insert, was a small electronic device she had never seen before. It was roughly the size of a matchbox and had tiny wires leading to what appeared to be small explosive charges. Elena's military training kicked in immediately. This wasn't just sabotage, it was potentially lethal. The device appeared to be designed to damage her rifle catastrophically during firing, which could cause serious injury or death to herself and anyone nearby. Her hands shook as she carefully extracted the device and examined it more closely. The workmanship was sophisticated, suggesting it hadn't been cobbled together by amateur saboteurs. This was professional-grade equipment, designed to cause maximum damage while appearing to be an accidental malfunction. Elena's mind raced through her options. If she reported the device, the competition would likely be halted while an investigation was conducted. The American team would be under suspicion, and Elena's opportunity to compete might be lost forever. But if she remained silent and the device was still active, she could be walking into a deadly trap. She decided to handle the situation herself, just as she had with the initial sabotage attempt. Using her knowledge of military explosives, Elena carefully disarmed the device and removed it from her equipment. But she kept it as evidence, storing it in a secure location where she could retrieve it if needed. The discovery of the explosive device changed everything for Elena. This was no longer about jealousy or resistance to women in combat roles. Someone was willing to risk her life to prevent her from competing successfully. The realization was both terrifying and infuriating. Elena spent that night double-checking every piece of her equipment, from her rifle to her ammunition to her personal gear. She couldn't afford to trust anyone else with her safety or her chances of success. If she was going to compete in this championship, she would do it alone, relying only on her own skills and preparation. The opening ceremony of the World Military Games shooting competition was held in the main lodge, with competitors from 37 nations represented. Elena stood with the American team as each country was introduced, feeling the weight of her nation's expectations. When the Americans were announced, she received polite applause, but she could sense the skepticism in the room. Many of the international competitors had likely never competed against women in their own countries, and they were curious to see how she would perform. The competition format was structured as a series of elimination rounds, starting with standard distance shots at 300, 600, and 1,000 meters. Only the top performers would advance to the extreme distance rounds at 2,000, 3,000, and, finally, the legendary 4,500-meter shot that few marksmen had ever successfully completed. Elena's first day of competition went perfectly. Her shots were precise and consistent, and she advanced easily through the preliminary rounds. But, as the distances increased and the competitor field narrowed, she began to notice increasing attention from her fellow Americans. During the 1,000-meter round, Elena achieved a perfect score, placing her among the top 5 competitors overall. The achievement should have been cause for celebration, but she could see the discomfort it caused some members of her own team. Torres, in particular, seemed increasingly agitated by her success. That evening, as Elena prepared for the next day's 2,000-meter round, she overheard another conversation that confirmed her worst fears. "This has gone too far," Torres was saying to Captain Webb. "She's making the entire American military look like we've gone soft. What kind of message does it send when our best shooter is a woman?" "Her scores speak for themselves," Webb replied, though Elena could hear uncertainty in his voice. "She's earned her place here." "Has she?" Torres challenged. "Or has political correctness clouded our judgment? When other nations see that America's sending women to do men's jobs, what does that say about our military readiness?" Elena felt sick listening to the conversation. Despite everything she had accomplished, despite the sabotage attempts she had overcome, there were still people on her own team who viewed her success as a liability rather than an asset. But the conversation also revealed something else: Torres wasn't acting alone. The level of sophistication in the explosive device suggested he had outside help, possibly from people who viewed Elena's participation as a threat to broader military policies. This was bigger than one jealous Marine; it was part of a coordinated effort to ensure she failed. The realization made Elena more determined than ever to succeed. She wasn't just fighting for her own career anymore, she was fighting against a system that would rather see her fail than acknowledge her excellence. The 2,000-meter round took place on the third day of competition, with wind conditions that challenged even the most experienced shooters. Elena had spent the morning studying weather patterns and calculating adjustments for the increased distance and changing atmospheric conditions. As she took her position on the firing line, Elena felt the familiar calm that descended upon her during moments of intense concentration. The target, barely visible even through her high-powered scope, seemed impossibly small and distant. But Elena had trained for this moment, and her confidence was unshakable. Her first shot was slightly high and to the right, missing the target by inches. It was the kind of near miss that could shake a shooter's confidence, but Elena simply made mental notes about wind conditions and adjusted her aim accordingly. Her second shot found the target, scoring in the 9 ring. The third shot moved closer to center, and her fourth shot scored a perfect 10. By the end of the round, Elena had achieved one of the highest scores of the day, securing her position among the final 12 competitors who would attempt the 3,000-meter distance. But, as she packed her equipment after the round, Elena noticed something that made her stomach drop. One of the action screws on her rifle had loosened significantly during the shooting. It was the same screw that had been tampered with before the competition, and its gradual loosening could have caused increasingly poor accuracy as the round progressed. Elena realized that the sabotage hadn't been limited to the initial attempts. Someone had continued to tamper with her equipment, making subtle adjustments that would cause degraded performance over time. The explosive device may have been removed, but the campaign to ensure her failure was continuing. That evening, Elena made a decision that would define the rest of her competition. She would no longer trust her equipment to anyone else's care. She moved her rifle and ammunition to her room and set up a makeshift cleaning and maintenance station. If someone wanted to sabotage her chances, they would have to go through her first. Working late into the night, Elena completely disassembled her rifle and examined every component under magnification. She found evidence of additional tampering, tiny scratches on scope adjustments that indicated they had been moved, thread lubricant that had been contaminated with grit that would cause binding, and a bolt that had been subtly modified to affect timing and accuracy. The scope of this sabotage was breathtaking. Every aspect of her rifle's performance had been subtly degraded, not enough to cause obvious malfunction, but sufficient to ensure gradually declining accuracy as the distances increased. It was a diabolical plan that would have caused Elena's performance to deteriorate precisely when the pressure was highest. Elena spent hours reversing each act of sabotage, returning her rifle to its optimal configuration. But she also made improvements, fine-tuning adjustments that would maximize her weapon's performance for the extreme distances ahead. If someone wanted to play games with her equipment, she would ensure that her rifle performed better than it ever had before. As dawn broke over the Swiss Alps, Elena finished her work and assembled her rifle for a final function check. The weapon felt perfect in her hands, balanced, precise, and ready for the challenges ahead. She had turned the sabotage attempt into an opportunity to optimize her equipment beyond its original specifications. The 3,000-meter round would be held later that day, with only 6 competitors advancing to the final 4,500-meter attempt. Elena knew that this round would separate the truly exceptional marksmen from merely excellent ones. The distance was beyond the effective range of most military rifles, requiring not just technical skill but an almost supernatural ability to read wind and atmospheric conditions. But Elena felt ready. She had overcome every obstacle placed in her path, and her rifle had never performed better. The saboteurs had underestimated her resilience and her technical knowledge. Now it was time to show them what a determined Marine could accomplish when pushed to her limits. As she headed to breakfast before the day's competition, Elena caught sight of Torres watching her from across the dining hall. His expression was unreadable, but she could sense his frustration. His carefully planned campaign of sabotage had not only failed but had made her stronger and more determined. Elena raised her coffee cup in a small salute toward Torres, a gesture that could be interpreted as respectful acknowledgement by any observers, but which she intended as a message. She knew what he had done, and she wasn't going to let it stop her. The game was far from over, but Elena Rodriguez was no longer playing defense. It was time to show the world what she was truly capable of achieving. The morning of the 3,000-meter round dawned crisp and clear, with atmospheric conditions that would challenge even the most skilled marksman. Elena stood at the equipment check station, watching as competition officials verified each rifle's specifications and ammunition loads. The scrutiny was intense. At these extreme distances, even the smallest advantage could mean the difference between success and failure. Elena's rifle passed inspection flawlessly. The officials noted her custom modifications with professional interest, recognizing the sophisticated engineering that had gone into optimizing the weapon for long-range accuracy. What they couldn't see was the hours Elena had spent the night before, ensuring that every sabotaged component had been restored and improved beyond its original specifications. The competitor field had narrowed to 12 of the world's best military marksmen. Standing nearby, Elena could see the British Commonwealth champion, Sergeant Major James Whitmore, methodically preparing his equipment with the precision of a Swiss clockmaker. The German team captain, Hauptmann Klaus Müller, was studying atmospheric data with an intensity that reminded Elena of her own preparation methods. But it was the Russian competitor who drew most of Elena's attention. Senior Lieutenant Dmitry Volkov had a reputation that preceded him, 3 world records, Olympic medals, and combat experience that rivaled any soldier present. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had never encountered a target he couldn't hit. As Elena took her position on the firing line, she felt the familiar sensation of the world narrowing to encompass only her rifle, and the distant target. The 3,000-meter mark stretched across a valley that seemed to disappear into the alpine mist, with the target barely visible even through her high-magnification scope. Wind conditions were complex, with thermal updrafts from the valley floor interacting with downdrafts from the surrounding peaks. Elena had spent an hour before the competition studying the flags and mirage patterns, building a mental map of the air currents she would need to account for in her shot calculations. The mathematics involved in a 3,000-meter shot were staggering. The bullet would spend nearly 4 seconds in flight, during which time it would drop over 200 feet from its initial trajectory. Wind drift could push the projectile several feet off target, and even the rotation of the Earth would have a measurable effect on the bullet's path. Elena had loaded her ammunition personally, using 419-grain solid copper bullets with a ballistic coefficient optimized for supersonic stability at extreme range. Each round had been weighed individually, and the powder charges had been measured to within 1/10 of a grain. The brass cases were uniformly prepared, with neck tension and overall length held to tolerances that most shooters would consider obsessive. As she settled into her shooting position, Elena became aware of the attention focused on her. Television cameras were positioned to capture the competition, and she could see officials and other competitors watching with intense curiosity. Few had ever seen a woman attempt shots at these distances, and many were skeptical about her ability to compete at this level. Elena pushed the external pressure from her mind and focused on her pre-shot routine. She checked wind conditions one final time, made minute adjustments to her scope settings, and controlled her breathing to achieve the rhythm that would ensure perfect shot timing. Through her scope, the target appeared impossibly small and distant. Even at maximum magnification, it was little more than a geometric shape against the mountain backdrop. Elena had to trust in her calculations, her equipment, and the thousands of hours of practice that had prepared her for this moment. Her first shot felt perfect as it left the barrel. The rifle's recoil was smooth and straight back, indicating that her body position and hold had been optimal. But, at 3,000 meters, even perfect technique couldn't guarantee success. Too many variables existed between the muzzle and the target for any shooter to be certain of their results. Elena watched through her scope as the bullet traced its long arc through the mountain air. For seconds stretched into eternity as she waited for the impact. When it came, the result was disappointing, a miss, with the bullet striking the ground several feet low and to the left of the target. But Elena had expected this. The first shot at any extreme distance was always a learning experience, providing crucial information about actual conditions versus calculated predictions. She made mental notes about the bullet's impact point and began calculating adjustments for her second attempt. Around her, other competitors were having similar experiences. The British shooter's first attempt had also missed, though by a smaller margin. The German shot had found the target but, well outside the scoring rings. Only the Russian had managed to score with his initial attempt, placing his bullet in the outer ring of the target with almost casual precision. Elena made careful adjustments to her scope settings, accounting for the actual wind conditions and atmospheric effects she had observed from her first shot. She also adjusted her point of aim slightly, compensating for what appeared to be a consistent thermal updraft in the valley. Her second shot felt even better than the first. Elena knew immediately that her adjustments had been correct, and she felt a surge of confidence as she watched the bullet's flight path. This time, the impact came exactly where she had predicted, center of the target, scoring a perfect 10. The range officials confirmed the hit, and Elena felt a wave of satisfaction wash over her. But the competition was far from over. Each shooter would fire multiple rounds, and consistency was just as important as individual accuracy. Over the next hour, Elena settled into a rhythm that felt almost meditative. Each shot was a complete cycle of observation, calculation, adjustment, and execution. Her rifle performed flawlessly, and her shooting technique remained smooth and consistent despite the challenging conditions. By the end of the round, Elena had achieved one of the highest scores of the day. Her consistency had been remarkable, with 7 of her 10 shots scoring in the 9 or 10 ring. Only Volkov had performed better, and only by a single point. As the competitors gathered for the announcement of results, Elena could see the surprise and respect in her fellow marksmen's eyes. She had proven that she belonged among the world's elite long-range shooters, and her technical knowledge and adaptability had impressed even the most skeptical observers. Captain Webb approached her as she was packing her equipment, his expression showing genuine admiration. "Outstanding performance, Rodriguez. You've earned your place in tomorrow's final round." Elena nodded her thanks, but she could see Torres in the background, his face dark with anger and frustration. His sabotage attempts had not only failed but had backfired, making Elena's success even more impressive given the obstacles she had overcome. The announcement came that evening. 6 shooters had qualified for the final 4,500-meter attempt. Elena Rodriguez would be competing alongside Volkov, Whitmore, Muller, and 2 other exceptional marksmen from France and Canada. The stage was set for what many were calling the most challenging shooting competition ever attempted. But Elena's preparation was far from complete. The 4,500-meter shot would push the absolute limits of rifle technology and human skill. The bullet would spend nearly 6 seconds in flight, covering a horizontal distance of nearly 3 miles while dropping over 400 feet from its initial trajectory. Wind effects would be magnified exponentially, and even minute atmospheric changes could cause significant point-of-impact shifts. Elena spent that evening studying meteorological data and updating her ballistic calculations for the extreme distance. She also conducted a detailed inspection of her rifle, ensuring that every component was optimized for maximum accuracy. The stakes were now higher than ever, and she couldn't afford any equipment failures or performance compromises. As she worked, Elena reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the sabotage attempts to the skeptical colleagues to the international pressure, every challenge had made her stronger and more determined. She thought about her grandfather, who had taught her that shooting was about more than hitting targets, it was about proving that dedication and skill could overcome any obstacle. The next morning would bring the ultimate test of everything she had learned and everything she had overcome. The 4,500-meter shot was more than just a competition, it was Elena's chance to prove that excellence has no gender, that determination can overcome prejudice, and that a Marine never gives up, no matter what obstacles are placed in her path. Elena closed her eyes and visualized the shot she would need to make. In her mind, she saw the bullet leaving her rifle, arcing high over the Alpine Valley, and finding its target with perfect precision. She had faced every challenge thrown at her and emerged stronger each time. Tomorrow, she would face the biggest challenge of all, and she was ready. The evening brought an unexpected visitor to Elena's room. A soft knock at the door revealed Sergeant Major Whitmore, the British Commonwealth champion she would be competing against the next day. "Mind if I come in?" he asked politely. Elena invited him in, curious about what the veteran marksman might want to discuss. "I wanted to congratulate you on today's performance," Whitmore said. "I've been shooting competitively for 25 years, and I've rarely seen such technical precision combined with adaptability. You adjusted to those wind conditions faster than shooters with twice your experience." Elena thanked him for the compliment, but she could sense there was more he wanted to say. "I also wanted to apologize," Whitmore continued. "When I first heard that the Americans were sending a woman to this competition,